Overnight, police are investigating now the shocking deaths of legendary director Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle.
News at 6 today, the investigation continues into the murders of legendary actor, producer, and director Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle.
Tracy Reiner struggled to hold back tears as she spoke, her voice shaking with disbelief. In an emotional interview with ABC News, she finally broke her silence about the tragedy that changed her life forever. On December 14, 2025, her parents, legendary director Rob Reiner and producer Michelle Reiner, lost their lives in a devastating incident at their Brentwood home in Los Angeles. That day didn't just take her parents, it shattered Tracy's entire world. For the first time, she also began to reveal painful truths about what really happened inside that house, details that have left Hollywood stunned. In the haunting interview, Tracy shared that her younger brother, Nick Reiner, had personally confessed to her the reason behind his shocking actions toward their parents. A private conversation, she says, that still echoes in her mind like a warning no one wanted to believe. Before we go any further, if Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner ever touched your life through their films, drop a comment below to honor their legacy and say your final goodbye. According to Tracy, the moment that haunts her the most happened in early December 2025, just 1 week before the tragedy. The conversation took place in the guest house behind her parents' Brentwood home. At the time, Nick was staying there temporarily after a period of instability, trying to get his life back on track. Tracy said Nick was the one who reached out, insisting they meet alone and urgently. Later that night, after a quiet family dinner, the two siblings sat together in the dimly lit guest house. Tracy described the atmosphere as heavy, almost suffocating, like something dark was about to unfold. Looking back now, she says that feeling was painfully accurate. Nick didn't waste time with small talk or apologies. He went straight to the point. He needed money, and not just a little. He made it clear this wasn't something that could be fixed in a few days. He needed help immediately, or as he put it, everything would fall apart. When Tracy pressed him for answers, Nick finally opened up. He admitted his debts had been piling up for months. He'd tried to handle it on his own, but failed. He told her he had already reached out to old friends and industry connections, but no one was willing to help. As he spoke, Tracy noticed how unsettled he seemed. He couldn't sit still, head down one moment, pacing the room the next, like someone trapped inside his own thoughts. Nick kept saying he felt cornered, abandoned, and misunderstood. "Everyone thinks I'll always be rescued," he told her, "but this time, no one's there for me." His voice wasn't angry, it was empty, hollow, the kind of frustration that builds quietly over years. Then, the conversation took a disturbing turn. Nick began talking about their parents, not with warmth, but with a cold detachment. According to Tracy, he spoke as if Rob and Michelle had controlled his life for too long. He said he'd waited years for things to change, that certain issues should have been dealt with long ago, and that his patience was running out. Throughout the conversation, Tracy noticed his hands clenching into fists and slowly releasing. His eyes kept darting around the room, never settling. He spoke quickly, like his thoughts were racing ahead of him. Then, without warning, he stopped mid-sentence, stood up, and stared out the window in complete silence. The room went quiet, but the tension said everything. On December 14th, around 3:40 in the afternoon, LAPD responded to a home in West Los Angeles belonging to Rob and Michelle Reiner. When officers arrived, they discovered 2 adults deceased, 1 male and 1 female. After working through the night with the coroner's office, authorities officially confirmed the victims were Rob and Michelle Reiner. But for Tracy, the warning signs had started much earlier. She later shared that everything shifted during a moment with Nick when he suddenly stood up, lowered his voice, and stepped closer. The energy in the room changed instantly. Tracy couldn't explain it, but her instincts kicked in hard. She didn't think he was about to do something specific, but her gut told her one thing very clearly. She needed to leave, immediately. Then, almost like fate stepped in, her phone rang. Tracy answered right away, pretending it was urgent. She grabbed her things, stood up, and walked out of the guest house without looking back, not even once. When she reached her car, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. Even after getting home, that feeling didn't fade. The anxiety stayed with her, like an alarm that refused to shut off. In the days that followed, Tracy debated telling her parents what had happened, but with the holidays approaching and family tensions already high, she second-guessed herself. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe it was nothing. Then, on December 14th, 2025, the devastating news broke. Major outlets like CNN and ABC confirmed what had happened. Suddenly, every strange moment from that night made sense. Tracy realized what she once thought was just a desperate ask for money was actually something much deeper, a clear warning that Nick was in serious mental and emotional distress. That night wasn't just about finances. It was the result of years of pressure, bad habits, and emotional struggles finally reaching a breaking point. Police later confirmed that the Robbery-Homicide Division took over the investigation. After working through the night, they arrested Nick Reiner in connection with the case. He was booked on murder charges and is currently being held on a $4 million bail. In an emotional interview, Tracy said, "I didn't see someone who suddenly changed in a few months. I saw the same behavior repeating again and again." Her words painted the picture of a long, painful decline that had been quietly unfolding for years. Nick Reiner was born and raised in Los Angeles, the son of Rob Reiner and the grandson of legendary comedian and TV icon Carl Reiner. From the outside, his life looked privileged and full of opportunity, but Tracy said that even early on there were warning signs. Nick was impulsive, easily triggered, and constantly pushing boundaries. In an old interview, Nick once admitted that as a teenager, he often needed to step away to clear his head, but those calm moments never lasted. According to Tracy, he slowly drifted into circles outside the family, people who lived fast, took risks, and avoided structure. He stayed out late, chased distractions, and tried to quiet the constant noise in his mind. Nick himself once said his struggles didn't come from a lack of love or money, they came from what was going on inside his head. He was always searching for peace, but instead, he found chaos. Those early choices, as Tracy described them, pulled him into a cycle that would haunt the family for years. Nick spent long periods in treatment facilities across California, sometimes for months at a time. Each stay brought hope that things might finally change, but when he returned home, the same pattern followed: frustration, anger, and resistance to structure. The family tried everything: doctors, therapy, rehab, boundaries. Nothing seemed to stick. Every time, Nick slipped back into the same destructive rhythm, growing more distant and harder to reach. Looking back, Tracy said those were the warning signs no one fully understood until it was too late. In a 2016 NPR interview, Nick spoke openly about hating the idea of slowing down or settling. He described growing up in a Hollywood family, surrounded by fame and expectations, but once he hit rock bottom, none of that mattered anymore. According to Tracy, Nick often repeated the phrase, "My background means nothing now." To the family, it became clear he wasn't truly ready to change, no matter how much they hoped. After years of treatment, Nick developed another dangerous habit: gambling. At first, it seemed harmless, small bets, casual games with friends, but soon he began believing that one big win could fix everything. According to reports from Page 6 and CNN, Nick eventually lost tens of thousands of dollars. Desperate to recover, he started borrowing money in secret and lying about why he needed it. Each time the family confronted him, his reaction was explosive. He insisted no one understood him. Tracy remembered one conversation clearly, when Nick said, "I just need one more chance, one more win, and I'll fix everything." But instead, every gamble made the situation worse, pulling him deeper into debt and emotional chaos. There were brief moments of hope. Around 2015, Nick worked with his father on the film Being Charlie. He even told the press that making the movie helped with his recovery. The film's main character talks about wanting to silence the noise in his head, a line Tracy said felt painfully close to Nick's real-life struggle. But the stability never lasted. Each improvement was followed by another crash, and each time it was worse. Nick's requests for money increased. His emotions grew more intense. His worldview became darker. Tracy described it as watching someone fight invisible enemies, always believing the world was against him. Looking back, she called Nick's life a vicious loop, falling, getting pulled back up, then falling again, deeper every time. Gambling, money problems, and emotional outbursts became impossible to separate, and through all of it, Rob and Michelle tried to help, even as it drained them emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Over time, Tracy said the situation stopped being just about Nick. It became a family struggle, weighing heaviest on her parents. They were forced to face impossible questions no parent should ever have to ask. How much help is enough? And when does helping become harmful? The Reiner family's Brentwood home, once a place of peace, slowly turned into something else, a revolving door of therapists, doctors, and painful conversations about what to do next. And tragically, this story didn't end with healing. It ended with heartbreak. According to Tracy, this wasn't a sudden breakdown. It was a quiet, non-stop fight that began when Nick was still a teenager, and it never truly ended. As far back as the early 2000s, Rob and Michelle were already seeking professional help for their son. They didn't ignore the problem or hope it would fix itself. They faced it head-on, doing everything loving parents possibly could. But behind the scenes, that hope came with exhaustion, fear, and a painful realization. No matter how much love they gave, the storm inside Nick might never settle. Tracy said her parents went far beyond what most people would. They worked with psychologists, doctors, and countless support programs across California. They even rearranged their work schedules, putting everything else on hold just to make sure Nick's treatment stayed on track. And according to Tracy, they never cared how it looked from the outside. Public image didn't matter. Reputation didn't matter. Their only concern was keeping their son safe. Family came before everything else. One powerful story, first reported by US Weekly and Page 6, and later confirmed by Tracy, involved a yoga instructor named Alana Zabel. She worked closely with the Reiner family in the early 2000s. During a session inside their Brentwood home, Nick reportedly had intense emotional outbursts, shouting, pacing, crying for long stretches. But what stood out wasn't the outburst, it was how Rob and Michelle handled it. They didn't send Nick away. They didn't call someone else to take over. They stayed right there with him, face to face, patiently waiting until he calmed down. Tracy said that moment perfectly summed up her parents, patient, loyal, and determined to face every storm together as a family. As Nick grew older and entered long-term treatment programs, Rob and Michelle remained his constant support. Tracy said there were times when Nick would be gone for months, working on his recovery. And when he came home, her parents welcomed him with warmth. They'd rearrange the house, often letting him stay in the guest house so he had privacy, but still close enough to keep an eye on him. Each time, they hoped it would be the last restart, but the cycle kept repeating. There were moments when Nick refused treatment entirely. He'd disappear, cut off contact, and vanish for stretches of time. Even then, Rob and Michelle never stopped searching. They called friends, counselors, anyone who might know where he was, just to confirm he was alive and safe. Tracy said some nights her parents didn't sleep at all. They stayed awake until sunrise, waiting for a call or a text, praying their son was okay. The emotional weight was crushing, and to make things harder, even professionals disagreed. Some said they were too soft and enabling Nick. Others said they were being too strict and needed more compassion. In a later NPR interview, Rob Reiner admitted that he sometimes listened to professionals more than his own instincts as a father, something he deeply regretted. Michelle also confided to close friends that there was a time she believed Nick was manipulating the family, and that belief only created more division at home. Still, no matter how bad things got, they never gave up on him. Tracy said her parents' love was never conditional. Even when they tried to set boundaries or take a tougher stance, they never fully closed the door. There was always space for Nick to come back, always another chance, no matter how exhausted they were. For years, their lives revolved around keeping Nick safe, financially, emotionally, and physically. Every decision, every plan, every quiet night somehow connected back to him. What shocked people on the outside was how private it all was. No press, no statements, no public breakdowns. To the world, Rob Reiner looked composed, still directing films, still smiling on red carpets. Michelle appeared at Hollywood events with her usual grace, but behind those smiles was a completely different reality. According to Tracy, her parents were locked in a long, exhausting battle with no roadmap and no happy ending. And as admirable as their refusal to give up was, it slowly made everything inside the family more complicated. Love turned into tension. Loyalty became a constant test of patience. What started as temporary strain turned into years of unspoken conflict. By around 2018, things reached a breaking point. Nick's growing financial problems and dependence began pulling everyone else into his chaos. Family gatherings stopped feeling warm, conversations felt tense, silence became heavy. Laughter at the dinner table was replaced with awkward small talk and anxious glances. For Roy Reiner, who lived closest to their parents, the toll was especially painful to witness. Tracy said Roy saw firsthand how drained their parents were. He was there for the late-night calls, the emergencies, the unpredictable moments when Nick would show up fragile or unstable. Over time, Roy began to step back, not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid that one night things would spiral completely out of control. Nick's relationship with Jake Reiner was different, but just as painful. Tracy described it as cold distance, two brothers who barely spoke. According to Page 6, Jake's silence wasn't anger, it was disappointment, maybe even heartbreak. Tracy said the quiet between them was louder than any argument. But the most strained relationship of all was Tracy and Nick. It was deeply personal. Tracy, who Rob adopted during his marriage to Penny Marshall, said that during Mick's darkest years, he became increasingly sensitive about her place in the family. Even when he didn't say it directly, she felt the comparisons, the suspicion. Whenever conversations turned to money or support, Nick's mood shifted instantly. If boundaries were mentioned, he took it personally, and more often than not, Tracy became the target of that frustration. Over time, emotional tension turned into deeper conflict about trust, finances, and even inheritance. Those conversations rarely ended with resolution. Most ended in silence. Tracy said it broke her heart. Her parents were torn, trying to help their son while protecting what little stability remained. The family dynamic, once full of warmth, became a quiet battlefield where love and exhaustion collided again and again. Sources close to the family revealed Nick had long felt unfairly judged, especially about money. He believed his parents trusted others more than him. While inheritance was never openly discussed, the tension had been quietly building for years. According to Tracy, Nick's resentment went deeper than finances. It came from growing up in the shadow of a legend. Rob Reiner was respected, admired, and celebrated. Tracy said Nick often felt he could never measure up. No matter what he did, he'd always just be Rob Reiner's son. That insecurity eventually turned into confrontation with his parents and his siblings. By this point, any discussion about trust, money, or control could ignite everything. Tracy believes that fragile emotional state led directly to the chain of events that followed. Looking back, she realized the night of December 13, 2025 was anything ordinary. Rob and Michelle attended Conan O'Brien's annual Christmas party, a Hollywood tradition. Nick was there too, and according to Tracy, something felt off from the beginning. Reports from CNN, People, and Page Six later revealed that Nick spent much of the night alone, asking guests repeatedly if they were famous. His behavior was tense, scattered, and unsettling. At some point, Rob and Michelle reportedly got into a heated argument. While details were never released, witnesses said the energy in the room shifted instantly. The party fell silent. When Tracy heard about it later, one thought hit her hard. Something had crossed a line. Rob and Michelle left together and returned home. The next afternoon, December 14th, tragedy struck. When Romy Reiner couldn't reach their parents, she went to their house. Minutes later, she ran out in panic, calling for help. At 3:40 p.m., LAPD arrived. The medical mariner later confirmed both deaths as homicides. When Tracy heard the news, her mind went blank. Then everything rushing back. Nick's behavior, the instability, the warning signs. It all made sense, and it was unbearable. Nick was initially missing. Surveillance footage later showed him at a gas station near USC, about 15 kilometers from the home. Tracy said when she saw the footage, she barely recognized him. He looked paranoid, lost, constantly looking around. Around 9:20 p.m., police arrested Nick, ending the search. Tracy said she didn't feel relief, only deep sorrow. On December 17th, Nick appeared in court and was charged with multiple serious counts involving severe harm and the use of a dangerous object. His arraignment was scheduled for January 7, 2026. For Tracy and her siblings, the pain wasn't just losing their parents, it was realizing the person responsible was the same one they'd spent years trying to save. The signs were always there, Tracy said quietly. We just never thought it would end like this. Rob and Michelle weren't just her parents, they were her home. Tracy said she never once felt less loved. Her father was steady and always there. Her mother was the warmth that held everything together. They loved us with everything they had. Her siblings later released a joint statement asking for privacy and compassion, urging the public to remember their parents for how they lived, not how they died. Now, with the case still ongoing, the Reiner... In the days following the arrests and court appearances, the silence surrounding the Reiner family became almost deafening. Friends, colleagues, and longtime neighbors struggled to understand how a family so respected, so private, and so deeply rooted in love could end up at the center of such an unimaginable tragedy. Tracy said the hardest part wasn't the headlines or the public speculation. It was waking up each morning and realizing that the people who had been her emotional compass were simply gone. She described grief not as one overwhelming feeling, but as a series of moments that hit without warning. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, a quiet house at night. Each reminder reopened the wound. Tracy said there were moments when she reached for her phone to call her father, only to remember that he would never answer again. Other times, she caught herself preparing to ask her mother for advice, forgetting, just for a second, that there would be no reply. The family made the decision early on to step away from public life completely. There were no interviews, no public appearances, no attempts to shape the narrative. Tracy said this wasn't about hiding, it was about survival. Every ounce of emotional energy they had was going towards simply getting through the day. Lawyers handled the legal process, close friends handled logistics. The family focused on grieving. Meanwhile, Hollywood reacted in waves. Directors, actors, writers, and longtime collaborators shared stories about Rob Reiner that painted a picture very different from the headlines. They spoke of a man who mentored young filmmakers, who used his influence to open doors for others, and who never forgot where he came from. Michelle was remembered as the quiet strength beside him, the one who grounded him, protected their family, and kept their private life truly private. But behind every tribute, Tracy said, there was also an unspoken truth. People were struggling to reconcile the public legacy with the private pain, and that contrast only made the loss feel heavier. As the investigation continued, Tracy found herself revisiting memories she hadn't thought about in years. Childhood moments that once felt ordinary now carried enormous weight. Family dinners, long car rides, nights when her father stayed up late talking with her about life, values, and resilience. She realized that her parents had been quietly teaching their children how to love deeply, even when it hurt. That realization brought both comfort and guilt. Tracy admitted that part of her wondered if more could have been done, if something had been said differently, if one conversation could have changed everything. But she also acknowledged a painful truth. Loving someone doesn't always mean you can save them. Sometimes all you can do is walk beside them as long as you're able. For years, Rob and Michelle had done exactly that. As more details emerged, experts weighed in publicly on the broader themes surrounding the case: mental health, addiction, family dynamics, and the impossible position parents are often placed in when trying to help an adult child in crisis. Tracy said she appreciated those conversations, but they also felt distant, academic, detached from the raw reality her family lived every day. This wasn't a theory or a case study to her, it was her life. She said the word enable was especially painful to hear. Outsiders often debated whether her parents had helped too much or too little, but none of those voices had been there for the sleepless nights, the frantic phone calls, the moments when the choice was never clear. Tracy emphasized that her parents were never blind, they were hopeful, and there's a difference. As weeks passed, the legal process moved slowly, methodically. Court dates were scheduled, motions were filed. The machinery of the justice system continued to turn, indifferent to the emotional devastation left behind. Tracy said the waiting was its own kind of torture. Every update reopened the trauma. Every mention of Nick's name came with a flood of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and a lingering sense of loss for the brother she once knew. She made it clear that her grief for her parents didn't erase the complicated feelings she had toward Nick. He wasn't just the accused, he was still her brother, the same boy she grew up with, the same person whose struggles had shaped so much of their family's story. Holding both truths at once was exhausting, but unavoidable. Tracy said that one of the most difficult moments came when she realized there would never be closure in the way people expected. No verdict, no sentence, no explanation could bring her parents back. Justice, she said, might exist on paper, but emotionally, the wound would remain. What she hoped for most wasn't punishment, it was understanding. Understanding that this tragedy didn't happen overnight, that it wasn't the result of one argument or one bad decision. It was the end of a long road paved with warning signs, missed connections, and unrelenting emotional pain. She also spoke about the impact on the extended family, nieces, nephews, cousins, all trying to process a loss that felt both shocking and deeply personal. Family gatherings were no longer what they used to be. Chairs sat empty, traditions felt hollow. Yet, in the midst of grief, there was a quiet determination to honor Rob and Michelle by holding the family together. That meant talking openly, supporting one another, and refusing to let silence erase the truth of what they lived through. Tracy said her parents would have wanted that. She recalled her father often saying that stories matter, that telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is how people learn and heal. That belief stayed with her. It's why she eventually chose to speak, despite how painful it was, not to relive the trauma, but to make sense of it. And maybe, she hoped, to help someone else recognize the warning signs sooner than her family did. In quiet moments, Tracy said she still feels her parents' presence, not as memories frozen in time, but as values that continue to guide her: compassion, patience, loyalty, the courage to love without guarantees. Those lessons didn't disappear with them. They live on in the choices she makes every day. As for the future, Tracy admits she doesn't know what healing will look like. Some days feel manageable, others feel impossible. But she's learned that grief isn't something you get over. It's something you carry and slowly learn to live with. She ended one conversation with a simple reflection that stayed with many who heard it. "My parents didn't fail. They loved, and sometimes love is all you have to give." For now, the Reiner family continues to grieve privately, away from cameras and speculation. The legal process continues. The headlines eventually fade. But the story behind them, the human cost, the emotional toll, and the lessons left behind remain. And that's the part worth remembering. Because this isn't just a story about tragedy, it's a story about love that refused to quit, even when the odds were impossible. This is Forever Fame TV, where we look beyond the headlines and into the lives that shaped them. Now, with the case still ongoing, the Reiner family faces a loss no amount of time can fix. As Tracy said it best, this was a tragedy written long before it happened. We just didn't understand the warning signs until it was too late. If you have thoughts or reflections on this story, drop them in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives here on Forever Fame TV.